All right. Well, hello everybody. Welcome again to another edition of the Open Mic. My guest today is a great reporter, New York Times best-selling author of many books, including his latest, Three Ring Circus, which is all about the 1990s championship Lakers of Kobe, Shaq, and Phil Jackson. Happy to say he's also a really cool guy with a great family. Wife is also an author. Jeff Pearlman, thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
I feel like I'm having deja vu. Have we done this before?
We'll keep that an inside joke, but yes, I am too. It feels like I'm hearing echoes in
Weird.
my head. But
Weird.
this time I am going to ask you, how is your Alf shirt doing? How did you come to be wearing an Alf shirt today?
So one of the things during pandemic that I've been all about is upping my t-shirt game. And there's a website called Tivana, which is the best place ever. When I say ever, I mean ever. And you can put in any subject you want. I got my son Emmett a really sweet Ricky Henderson shirt. I got my daughter a shirt. She's a militant Jew that says kosher. And I found myself old school Alf. So.
Well, hey, Alf was awesome. For anyone who didn't see Alf, go find it on Hulu or something. It was
Vastly underrated TV show. Vastly underrated.
Absolutely. And, I'll be honest with you, Alf was a dead ringer for one of my first journalism professors back in college. So,
Interesting.
Steve Maganini, if you're watching this, and I know you probably are, it's true. Before we get too much further, just a reminder, folks, if you would please hit the subscribe button. Lots of great content I'm building on this channel and a lot more to come. So don't miss out anything. I'm going to presume, we'll get this one out of the way quicker. I'm going to presume, going in every book, when you're going to tell the unvarnished truth about an athlete or a team, some people are going to really like that. Some people are not going to like it. They're going to get downright mad at you. Of course, with this book, we had the unthinkable, having Kobe's very untimely or shocking death. Tell me how that has impacted this book. We're far enough away from that event now. How has it played out for you with that since that happened for the book?
Well, the book was pretty much done. It was almost done. It was done basically. And then I was sitting in a cafe and a friend of mine, a writer named Amy Bass, texted me and was like, rumor has it Kobe Bryant died, or word is Kobe Bryant died. And, shocked, devastated, hurt, etc. And at some point though, you have this book and what do you do with this book? And I ended up writing what I could, which is really a very short author's note discussing, I guess kind of explaining that what you're about to read is just Kobe as a young person. And that the guy who died at 41 wasn't the guy who was a kind of annoying 21-year-old. It's a huge difference. And I did that for two reasons. I did number one, because I believe it and I thought it was important to say. And to be honest, I did it a little number two because of self-preservation. There's right there hanging behind me. Let's see that there is a cover of a Sports Illustrated excerpt of my Walter Payton book that came out maybe 10 years ago. And it was an excerpt that came out a while before the book came out. Anyone had the book. And the excerpt was about Walter Payton sort of at the end of his life when he was a lot of infidelity, a lot of depression, suicidal tendencies. And it went over horribly to the point where I was supposed to go to Chicago to promote the book. And my publisher was like, there's no way we're sending you to Chicago to get your head smacked in by someone. So with Kobe, I was nervous about that. And I was concerned about that. And amazingly, it's been cake. I mean, it really has. I think the big difference is I think people knew who Kobe was. They knew he was difficult and they knew he was a pain and he knew, he had an ego and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think they were prepared for that with Walter Payton. And I think they knew with Kobe Bryant that was the case. I think that made it a little bit easier.
Well, there's never going to be an NBA Kobe Man of the Year award. You have the NFL Walter Payton Man of the Year award.
Exactly. Right.
Very, very different scenario. And I don't want to just keep dredging over ancient history, but you've had a lot of experiences in your career. You've dealt with some very difficult people. I mean, I'm starting with, of course, maybe the worst of all, John Rocker. But every reporter who's been around for a long time has had the athlete experience, and somebody who deals with athletes exclusively, they can be difficult most of the time. How
I would
different?
not say most of the time. I'd say most of the time they're not difficult, but I would say you always come across difficult. You will have difficult athletes. Yeah. Anyway, ask your question, but I wouldn't say most are
Well,
difficult. I would say most are great, actually, to be honest with you.
well, how has it been different for you in handling what this situation now, maybe than what it would have? What have you gleaned from all that experience in dealing with maybe some difficult athletes? But often, and you're right. I want to backtrack just a bit, because having to ask difficult questions often at times when very competitive people aren't in a mood to answer those questions, or to be self-reflective, which is not, it's difficult for most people. But you've had a lot of experience at it now. You've done it at the highest levels. How has that experience helped you in terms of dealing with this situation, which came along so suddenly and unexpectedly?
I think a few things happen as you get older, and you accrue experience. I'm not nearly as thin-skinned as I used to be, and that's a cliche, but it's actually true. I'm just not as thin-skinned as I used to be. I do not take things personally the way I used to. I don't take, if someone blows me off, I'm not upset at them for blowing me off. They have their reasons. Um, and also, I feel like as you get older, like you're not as intimidated anymore. You're just not. You're not as intimidated anymore. I walk into it sounds stupid, but I walk into a room to interview Shaq. And I had a lot of people say, whoa, what was that like? And to me, it was cool, but it was walking into a room to interview Shaq. It was another human being, and we're sitting down, and I know what I want to ask him. And I'm comfortable with myself as a reporter. And I wasn't when I was younger at all. I mean, I was nervous and sweaty hands, and walking into a baseball clubhouse forever was the most intimidating experience I'd had as a reporter. It just is. It's scary. And you feel like you're the geek walking with the cool kids, and it's high school all over again, or junior high. And I feel like as you get older, it's not that you're no longer the geek. It's that you don't give a shit about being the geek anymore. You're not, it doesn't bother you. You don't care. Like, all right, you don't want to talk to me. I don't. I had a great moment in my career, Bleacher Report had assigned me to do a story about he was on the New Orleans Pelicans at the time, Jimmer Fredette out of BYU.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going to meet Jimmer. New Orleans was flying out here to LA. I was going to meet him at a hotel and talk to him. And the PR guy for the Pelicans wrote me as I was waiting and said, Jimmer can give you 15 minutes. And I said, don't worry about it. I'm just not going to do the story. Like, I'm not begging a guy who's 15 years younger than me for 20 minutes of his time. I'm just not there anymore, And it was really liberating for me. It's the first time I've ever done that. It was the best. If you don't want to talk to me, you don't want to talk to me. I'll find other people to talk to. If you're mad at me, I'll deal with it. I still get nervous walking up to like strange places. I still don't love the random phone call where the person is expecting it. But just over time, you learn to walk through your fears and just deal with it. And you're not afraid nearly as much as you are when you're younger.
It's funny because, I'm a reporter as well in the political realm. I think that's something you also have to learn really quickly. There's, regardless of what position of power somebody has, you have to challenge them at times. You have to. It's part of, what's the point of you being there otherwise, right? But I think it's so funny with sports, because you mentioned high school and junior high kind of mentality, and that's, certainly we see that with sports, where it seems like a lot of fans just can't let go of that idolization issue. And if you're the person telling the unvarnished story, it might even be good. It might even put them in a, not a bad light, but a human light. And that really seems to offend some people. They don't want to see their sports heroes as humans. They want to see them as something else. But you can't do your job if you see them as something else. You have to go in and see them as humans, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always say to people, like with Kobe, as an example, people would ask me when I was really hard and heavy in promoting the book, they'd say, well, what do you say to people? What would you say to people who love Kobe and don't want to know this about him? And I would say, don't read the book. Like, don't read the book. It is perfectly okay to be that kind of sports fan. Like, I'm not even being snide. There's nothing wrong with that. If this is your escape and you love watching Kobe Bryant, or you love watching LeBron, and you just want to know them as great basketball players, or you love whoever, Bruce Springsteen, or you love Nas or whoever, you just love them as performers. Why do you need to know more? You don't. Enjoy yourself. Like, that's great. There's no, so I used to be like, no, you don't understand. You need to, but you don't. Like, these books aren't for everyone. There are a lot of books I don't read, like I don't always necessarily want to know everything about certain people. So I'm done insulting sports fans who are like, I don't want to read this. You had it in for Kobe. I'm like, listen, man, I totally get it. You don't want to read this book. It's totally fine. Don't feel compelled to. I understand. That's been very liberating for me. I get it. You don't have to read this book. It's all good.
I love that. Well, I have read many of your books. I've read Sweetness and Showtime and Gunslinger and The Bad Guys Won. And
so you're the sucker.
I am the sucker, the willing sucker here. Nice. And I'm going to unashamedly steal a line from Smokey and the Bandit, which I'm showing my age. It's a big movie when I was a teenager. But you, sir, have a lyrical way of cutting through the bullshit. And
thanks.
What I mean by that is, I know you have to, the kind of research it takes to do a job like this is immense. And just the overwhelming amount of it that somehow you have to then funnel down to be able to tell a readable story. And I will say, you are one of the more really pleasingly narrative reads in sports journalism I've ever seen. I would say that if you weren't sitting in front of me on camera, but I want to focus, I guess, on the number of interviews you do and the research you do. Talk a little bit about it, because I know you've told me in the past some of these have been 600, 500 interviews. I mean, for those who don't know what it takes to do a biography like this one or any of the other ones, give us a little background on that.
I mean, I'll show you. I am so as you know, I'm working on a Bo Jackson biography right now.
Yeah.
And there's this book I bought on eBay. Okay, it's called Bo Stories, and it was published by the Sporting News in 1990. And I'll go through this book, and I will literally do this. So I will go through and I'll circle names, and I'll be like, all right, call, and I will write call, and I have a list. I have a list here, people I need to call. I have a list here of stuff I want to find and get more into. And today I was literally going through the call list and trying to find these people. And like, just as an example, Bo hit a home run in spring training in 1989 against Oil Can Boyd. And it was this massive shot. And here, somewhere in the book, it mentioned the name of the parking lot attendant who wound up with the ball. I love stuff like that. I would rather talk to the parking lot attendant than George Brett. I love the parking lot attendant. So I was reaching around today, and somehow I found his wife, the parking lot attendant's wife. And she told me she was at the game too when he had it, and blah, blah, blah. And she said, I just called him and he's excited to talk to you, and he'll talk to you, he'll call you later today. I just love that stuff. Like, to me, it's about finding the little tiny minutia and expanding on it, because anyone can tell Kobe Bryant, everyone knows Kobe Bryant, 81 points, last game against Utah, rookie year, the 96 draft, like all that stuff, But I like finding, I'll be reading about Kobe Bryant or Bo Jackson or Walter Payton, and you'll find out that he really loved the hamburgers at Denny's, or he used to go to school with this girl named Martha, and he used to tease her and call her, Maddie Head Martha, whatever. And then you want to find Martha, and you want to find out her background. You want to find out about her. And these books wind up becoming what I really like, truly. I like when the books expand themselves and they're actually about 300 different people from a person's life. Or if you're writing about a basketball team, the last thing I want to write about is, and then they beat the Celtics and then they beat the Kings. I hate that stuff. Just like with Bo Jackson. Yeah. I don't need to tell you about Bo Jackson's 9 games with the Raiders in 1988. It's not that interesting. But what was Bo Jackson, kid from Bessemer, Alabama, like in LA? What was that like for him? That's the kind of stuff I love. And who did he meet in the restaurants he went to and stuff like that? I just really get into that stuff a lot. And some people will say, I felt like your book didn't tell me enough about sports. And I'm always like, yeah, I know, I just not doesn't do it for me. So it is what it is.
Well, I will be honest, in Gunslinger, I thought, I enjoyed learning about Brett Favre's mom and his sister.
Yeah.
I guess maybe we're both just journalism nerds or something, but I really enjoy learning those tidbits because yeah, that was never reported in SI or what have you. We've all heard the story a million times of, how Bo got hurt and everything else, or how great athletes, they're so well documented in this day and age that
Yeah.
that little stuff is the last part that we can get that's fresh by the time they're retired, right?
Well, it's funny. Like every now and then I go on Amazon, see what the reviews are, see how many reviews you have, that kind of stuff. And I never get mad. I really don't. I don't get mad if it's a 1-star review. This book sucked, blah, blah, blah. Hey, it's okay. The one thing that drives me crazy, I hate when people call me by my name. People call me Jeffrey. Like that drives me crazy. That's something in my life that drives me crazy. The thing that drives me crazy in regards to books is when someone will write a review and be like, learn nothing new. And I'm just like, I interviewed 600 people. There's no way you didn't learn something new in this book. Like that shit drives me crazy. Because I go out of my way. Like Bo Jackson, I have it here somewhere. Bo Jackson wrote an autobiography called Bo Knows Bo with Dick Schaap. It was excellent. It was great. I don't want to write that book. I'd be a failure. For me, if I wrote the same book, that wouldn't make any sense. So when people say I didn't learn anything new, it's the greatest insult for me is hearing that. I can't stand that. And I feel like when I read it, it's not like I just dismiss them. I think, God, what did I do wrong here? Like if they really feel that way, what did I do wrong here?
Well, along those lines, when we're talking about a Bo Jackson or a Brett Favre or somebody, who's had probably millions of words written about them, and you're thinking about a project that you want to take on, are there projects where someone has been so covered or their story has been told so many times that even if you thought you could find some new nuggets, it's probably not something that you're going to want to invest 2 or 3 years of your life into doing?
All right, so definitely yes, but it's very interesting. I'm pretty good friend with Lee Montville, who I worked with at Sports Illustrated. And I remember Lee Montville wrote a Babe Ruth biography that ended up being really, really good. And when he was working on it, I was kind of like, why would you want to write a Babe Ruth biography? There have been 8 million Babe Ruth biographies. And he said, I've always remembered this. He said, but nobody's written my Babe Ruth biography. And I do think everyone comes in with their own perspectives and their own viewpoints and their own vantage points and their own ways they want to take a story. Personally, I probably wouldn't do a Babe Ruth book. Jane Levy did a great one. Lee did a great one. There've been, I forgot what the classic is, but I read
Richard Ben Kramer's.
Yeah, exactly. Classic. I wouldn't do Richard Ben Kramer's speaking. I wouldn't do a DiMaggio book. I feel like that's been done. In a way, the goal is actually, I've said this before. The goal is to write a book. Like I would hope if someone comes along and they say, I want to write a Walter Payton book, you would hope they read the book you wrote and say, I don't really need to do this. That's when you we don't need, the world does not need another DiMaggio book. I mean, maybe there are ways you could write it well, but for me personally, I don't need to do that. So if I feel like a subject has been just done beautifully and done artistically, like Jane Levy on Koufax, I don't need to write a Koufax book. She did a freaking brilliant job. She did a brilliant Mickey Mantle job. I don't need to do that. So I don't have I'm always looking for relatively new turf, to a certain degree.
Right.
I'm not looking to follow up a great biographer. And I don't have a big enough ego where I'm like, I'm better than, like if Jane Levy did it, odds are she's going to do it better than I did it. So I'm not going to touch it.
Well, I was going to ask, because, you brought up Jane and yes, her Koufax book in particular is just state of the art for somebody like that. Who you mentioned Lee Montville too. Who are the people out there doing what you do that inspire you, that you like to read, that you respect, and that you look to if you do want to read something?
I mean, it's kind of funny. I feel like over time doing this, I'm working on my 10th book, so I've actually been around a while now, and you develop like kinship. It almost feels like a club, right? It actually feels like a club. Like Jonathan Eig is a very, very good friend of mine, and we talk very often. He wrote Luckiest Man by Lou Gehrig, did Jackie Robinson bio. He did a great Ali book. I mean, he's just great. And Howard Bryant, who wrote the Hank Aaron biography, is a really good friend of mine. John Wertheim at Sports Illustrated, one of my closest friends. And those are people I've really come to confide in. And we talk about sort of the intricacies. And also it's like writing a book is a freaking nightmare. I mean, I always say it's not there are many worse jobs to have. Like there are harder jobs. I cannot complain to someone who's answering phones all day or someone who's picking up the trash or be a lawyer, like it's a much more enjoyable job, I'm sure. But it's mentally draining. It's physically draining. You think everything sucks. You never think you have enough. Three Ring Circus, the book you're holding it. I hated that book when I finished it. I was like, this is my worst book. This thing's gonna flop. This sucks. My wife laughs at me. She's like, you always say this, but I really, so those guys, there's a guy named Pat Jordan who wrote a book called A False Spring, which was one of my favorite books of all time. So there are people out there who I've come to feel kinship with.
How long on average does it take you to do one of these books? I mean, I'm guessing 2 or 3 years. Is that about right?
Usually I would say, I usually take a year and a half ish to report it, and I'll just report. That is it. I would do no writing on the book. And then I'll take 6 months, 5 months to write it. So about 2 years and change.
And you don't, I mean, clearly for this book, you spoke with Shaq, and, clearly you want to try to talk to the subject if you can, but I know with Favre, it didn't work out. And clearly Walter Payton had passed on, clearly it's not critical to be able to write that book, but is it sometimes even better maybe to not talk to that person? Does it actually make it more compelling in a way?
All right. So I don't think so, but I think I spent a lot of my time telling myself that because it makes you feel better when the person doesn't talk to you. But I don't think you can. The thing is, like, you want to get as much into someone's head as possible, right? Like, you want to know. Like, I always think it's funny, and I've been guilty of this too. We'll write something and we'll be like, he stood at the plate thinking about blah, 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 blah. But the truth of the matter is, for all you know, the guy's thinking, check out the hottie in row 7, or man, I can't wait to watch The Simpsons tonight. Like, you have no idea what they're thinking. So I do think the closer you can get to the actual brain itself is always better. It's always preferred. Like, Kobe didn't talk for this book, and forget that he passed on. Like, I would have preferred he talked. I would want to talk to him. The one thing I will say is when people don't talk, it motivates you hardcore. Like, that's the biggest thing it does do. I never get mad at people for not talking. It's their right not to talk. But I always think, okay. And you roll up your sleeves and you're like, if you're not going to talk, I'm going to interview 600 people for this book. And I'm going to talk to everyone under the sun. And even if they say, I'm going to call everyone. So I'm going to compensate for you not talking. And hopefully when it's all said and done, and before I've written it, I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to say, just so you know, I've interviewed this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. I want to give you one last opportunity to talk. And it hasn't worked for me yet, but I always think it's a good approach.
The industry has changed so much over the last 20 years, in myriad ways. One of them being the budgets that they do or do not have for promotion. You've always done a tremendous amount of promotion for your own books, which I really admire, because putting yourself out there, even with it when you have a brand new book and facing that gauntlet of questions is tough. How do you keep all of your momentum going with promotion, your podcast that you do, which if you haven't seen it, Two Writers Sling and Yang is excellent. Jeff is a much better interviewer of writers than I am. You have blog posts, you're very active on social media, you write freelance pieces. Somewhere in there, your family expects you to be a husband and a father. How do you keep all that balance, or how do you keep all of that balanced while also really feeling like you've given yourself the fullest effort you can to promote this project that you've spent 2 or 3 years on?
I mean, the thing, I guess number one, it's gotten easier that my kids are a little older. Like, I don't have toddlers anymore, and doing this all with toddlers is really, really hard. My kids are now in high school. It definitely makes it easier. I really love what I do. Like, all the heartache and all the pain of it all, I do love it. Like, I love it. And in regards to promoting a book, like, you put all that time into working on this thing, you at least want to give it a puncher's chance of selling. So I'm going to go all out. And the other thing is this, like, I will say, you can't have any ego about it all as far as PR. Like, you just can't. I will appear on any podcast and talk about this. I will do any, you want a guest post? Sure. You want this? Sure. You're a radio station with 5 listeners? Sure. Like I will just, I'm happy. There people say, do you want me to, you can ask me anything you want. I don't care. You can ask me any question you want. I'm never going to say no. I'm never going to I busted my ass on this book. I bust my asses on these, but just like all other authors do. So I am just, it comes with it. And also, I mean, it's weird. Like, it's really weird. The whole game of PR has changed so much since my first book. My first book came out in 2003. It was about the 86 Mets. And the goal was to get, like, it sounds quaint now, like newspaper articles about your book. And that'd be wonderful. And somewhere in a binder downstairs, I have like clips from the Daily News. And that stuff is relatively valueless now. Social media is where it's at. So I recognize the fact, I'm probably on Twitter too much. I recognize the fact, though, that it is, if you're going to promote books, you have to have a following. If you have to have a following, you have to work at having a following. And it takes annoying amounts of time. So I just do it.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you about social media really quickly here. Does it really help you sell books? I mean, is it worth the aggravation?
100 million%. It's not, it sucks. Like, I'm always like, God, I hate Facebook. God, I hate Twitter. I need to get off. I hate it. Right. And I'm on it way too much. And the whole thing, and the wife's always like, just stop being on Twitter. The thing is, it is direct marketing 101. Like, if you look at if I go to my Twitter feed right now, which I can because my window's open, right? I have, because it's pretty much always open, I have 65,000 followers, and I have 65,700 people I am following, right? That's an embarrassingly pathetic ratio. And every now and then people will be like, loser, but here's the thing. If I have a book coming out on Brett Favre, I will go to Brett Favre's Twitter feed and I will follow all those people. I will literally spend a couple hours going, follow. All the people follow Brett Favre. And maybe 30% of them will follow me back. Well, all of a sudden you have all these people who are Brett Favre fans following you and your news about your book coming out. So when I have a Laker book coming out, I was going to Kobe's feed, follow. Shaq's feed, follow. Same thing. It's just great direct marketing. You can't have an ego about it because you look like a loser having that many people, following that many people. But at the end of the day, I haven't found any better way to sort of promote. So I don't know.
I have one other question I'm going to ask you, but you mentioned her, so I have to bring it up because you're really fortunate. You're married to maybe the world's greatest human, and she's also an author. She's also, I guess. I want to make what's her official title? I almost said psychiatrist. She's not a psychiatrist.
She's a social worker, actually.
Social worker. Okay.
Social worker.
But I mean, it sounds to me like she really is like the world's greatest wall to bounce stuff off of, and keeping you sane and your ego in check and all that other stuff. I mean, would you be as successful without her? This is like the biggest softball question ever in the world, but here you go.
Oh, no, I mean, she's great. She's great. The thing is, it's like, and it's not, she became a writer later. She was not a writer when I met her, and she became a writer. She's read every book I've written. She's my editor for every book. She's my therapist. She's my social worker. She's my support. And I hope I do the same for her, but she's just really, there are it takes a lot of understanding, I think, to put up with some of the shit that comes with being married to someone who writes books. Like, it's not that easy. I'm moody and self-doubting and self-loathing. And like I said earlier, you think everything you've written sucks. Sorry. And you're miserable. And it just takes something. It takes someone to deal with that, and she's really good about it. And I'm always like, do you think this book is going to sell? Yes, it's going to sell. Do you really think this book is going to sell? It's going to sell. Don't worry. It's going to sell. She's just, and also like, she's just a genuinely great human being. Like you said, she honestly is just a great human being. And to have that support, to have someone, who you kind of roll with, who just oozes a certain level of goodness. It's great. It's the best life move I've made.
That's a little bon mot, because she's like I said, she's also an author, but I'll share the story of she gave a kidney to a stranger, for God's sake. I mean, she's some people talk the talk, some people walk the walk. She she walks the walk.
I mean, she literally saw a flyer hanging in a Starbucks of someone who needed a kidney, came home and was like, what do you think of this? And I was like, I mean, what I honestly thought is she's the kind of person who would do that. I aspire to be the kind of person who does that, but she actually did it. So, and now we're really good friends with the guy and he's doing great. And she's just, yeah, she's a really good person. Very good person.
That's fabulous. Well, I always like to end on what I think is a fun question. I hope it's a fun question. I mean it to be a fun question.
Putting a lot of pressure on this question.
I am. The pressure is just intense. It's like at the bottom of Niagara Falls.
I'm ready for the most fun question ever.
Absolutely. I can put you together with any one of the following three people for anything you want: dinner, drinks, mini golf, whatever.
Okay.
Your options are going to be Marv Throneberry, Casey Stengel, or Mickey Mantle. I'm going all New York, tri-state for you. Which one would you pick and why?
Okay, so I think I got to go Mantle, just because, like I am. It's funny. I'm not a drinker. I'm not a smoker. Blah 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 blah. I look back at that era with a tremendous amount of longing for what I missed. Hanging out at Elaine's, drinking, smoking cigarettes, the city, the buzz, blah blah blah. And I just feel like it feels like the largeness of Mickey Mantle would be something really interesting to behold. So I would not go miniature golfing with Mickey Mantle. I feel like I'd want to go out for a night of drinking and womanizing when I was single with Mickey Mantle and just see what that was like.
That's a compellingly honest answer. I like that. I would want to go womanizing with Mickey Mantle. I'm guessing if he's your wingman, it's going to be a good night.
I can't imagine anyone would answer. I could see, if you ask 100 people, I could see Mantle getting 70, Stengel getting 30, Marvelous Marv is getting 0. Nobody's picking Marvelous Marv. That's a ridiculous third.
I know.
You want Seaver. Seaver would be
90% of the people watching this have probably have no idea. They're going to have to go Google that and figure out who the hell was Marv Throneberry, right?
Exactly.
Because I'm showing my age too.
That's
well,
okay.
I'm gonna take us out by reminding folks, 3 Ring Circus. If you haven't read it, please do so. It's fabulous, as all of Jeff's books are. Jeff, thank you again. I greatly appreciate it. Please give my best to the wife. And we will see you again next time on the open mic. I'd like to say, check out my website because we have a really good list of folks coming up, and a lot of good folks already there. All right, until next time, see you all. Take care.